Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We're on page 148 of the Proclaimer's book, still in chapter 11. The light gets brighter and brighter. This subhead is the light shines more and more. And so what we talked about last time was they're using the example of Babylon the Great, how they figured out in 1963 that Babylon was somehow greater than they thought before. It's now the world empire, false religion. Before that, they'd had a view more like Protestantism. But now it's everybody but us. So it was about us. And yes, as the organization went through decades, it got more and more about us.
Yeah.
Which explains the next part that we're going to be dealing with, not Babylon now. We're going to be talking about their advance in spiritual illumination, particularly in the area of their understanding of Revelation. That is the book of Revelation. So here's the first paragraph on page 148. Indeed, the unfolding of events foretold in the entire book of Revelation has provided an abundance of spiritual illumination. In 1917, a study of Revelation was published in the book The Finished Mystery. But the Lord's Day, referred to at Revelation 1:10, was just beginning back then. Much of what was foretold had not yet occurred and was not clearly understood. However, developments during the years that followed cast greater light on the meaning of that part of the Bible. And these events had a profound effect on the very illuminating study of Revelation that was published in 1930 in the 2 volumes entitled Light. Let's pause there for a second. What they're saying is that by 1930 they'd abandoned the positions in the Finished Mystery, and Rutherford had replaced it with 2 volumes called Light. What did he replace the Finished Mystery with? It's now no longer about Russell and his era. It's now about what's just happened to us, the ones we might call the Rutherfordites. And that interpretation is still very much their interpretation. For instance, the 7 trumpets being 7 conventions that Rutherford presided over in the 1920s. So, but notice the language, very illuminating study. No, you've abandoned these books even by the 1960s, as you say next. It says in the next part of the paragraph, during the 1960s, a further update appeared in the books Babylon the Great Has Fallen, the book they have referred to in the last segment, God's Kingdom Rules, and then it's finished The Mystery of God. So the book I studied, well, the 2 books I studied in those days to interpret Revelation were those 2. And then it's finished The Mystery of God. Okay, that's now 52 years after the Finished Mystery, and now you're saying the mystery is over. 2 decades later, another in-depth study was made of that part of the Bible. The figurative language of Revelation was carefully analyzed in the light of similar expressions in other parts of the Bible. 20th century events in fulfillment of the prophecies were reviewed. The results were published in 1988 in the thrilling book, Revelation, Its Grand Climax at Hand. Right. I was not thrilled by that book when it came out. It was a rehash of what they said before, really.
And when you hear from people, they don't usually think of it as a thrilling book, and they're tired of going through it and having to find all the, what has been changed, because they've changed it.
It's changed it since then many times.
Giving them bulletins like, okay, we've changed our minds about this and that.
So, but that book is now no longer published. I don't know if it's available on the website. But the point is, what was thrilling about it was just that they had a lot of Technicolor pictures. But the material was mostly a rehash of the 2 books from the 60s and Rutherford's book from 1930 in terms of its interpretive system.
So then it continues, during the early years of their modern-day history, foundations were being laid. Much valuable spiritual food was provided. In recent years, a greater diversity of Bible study material has been provided to satisfy the needs of both mature Christians and new students from many backgrounds. Continued study of the Scriptures, along with fulfillment of divine prophecy, has in many instances made it possible to express Bible teachings with greater clarity. Because their study of God's Word is progressive, Jehovah's Witnesses have spiritual food in abundance, even as the Scriptures foretold would be true of God's servants. Adjustments in viewpoint are never made with a view to become more acceptable to the world by adopting its declining moral values. On the contrary, the history of Jehovah's Witnesses shows that changes are made with a view to adhering even more closely to the Bible, being more like the faithful first-century Christians, and so being more acceptable to God. Well, that's gall. Thus, their experience is in harmony with the prayer of the Apostle Paul, who wrote to fellow Christians, "We have not ceased praying for you and asking that you may be filled with the accurate knowledge of His will, in all wisdom and spiritual comprehension, in order to walk worthily of Jehovah to the end of fully pleasing Him, as you go on bearing fruit in every good work, and increasing in the accurate knowledge of God." And then they end kind of giving you a little preview of the next one. That increase of accurate knowledge of God also had a bearing on their name, Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's the next chapter, how we became known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, gall is the right word. I think you muttered it to yourself.
Yeah.
Gall. To compare yourself with what Paul is saying they were praying for, that the disciples be filled with the accurate knowledge of God. They were not preaching what you preached.
And
First
they
of all,
change their message.
They were not preaching times and seasons. They were actually told at the beginning of the book of Acts not to think about the times and seasons. And you've confessed right here in this page of modern applications to your work, you've confessed that a lot of your work has been about times and seasons. It's about how all of this is foretold. All of the work we're doing in the generation after 1914, and now a generation beyond 4 generations since 1914. All the work we're doing is somehow foretold in the book of Revelation.
So their concentration is Revelation.
Yeah.
And then besides Revelation, it's other prophetic books. That's what they concentrate on, all pointing to times and seasons
and themselves.
And how they fulfill it, and we're living in the last days.
Yeah.
When do they get around to just studying
the real Bible without the apocalyptic element?
That's right.
Well, first of all, if you want proof of what we just said about their concentration is on the prophetic books, just think of the number of books they've just listed in one paragraph here on Revelation. 6 books on Revelation, replacing the original interpretation 3 times, and now getting rid of that one too, the 4th one, that is, with edits. But also Ezekiel. 6 books on Ezekiel, including the Finished Mystery, which had 200 pages on it.
And it took them 130 years before they did anything on Acts.
Yeah.
A so-called commentary on Acts, which is not really a commentary, because it's bits and pieces all over the place.
That's right. And they have mastered the art of finding themselves. No matter where they go in the Bible, in Acts, it's about us.
Yeah.
It's not about, and in Revelation, it used to be not even about the 7 churches that existed in the 1st century when John wrote. It was about 7 ages of the church. It's all very arbitrary, but the end run is always the same. Somehow we're being foretold.
Yeah.
Then
so, and then I think this thing here about changes being made with a view to following the Bible more closely, and then they make some slight there about adopting, not like the world, adopting declining moral values, but look at Christian books about, even the books they're talking about here. They don't have to revise them to say we're totally wrong, because they don't do what you do and analyze it and make it sound like it's about themselves. Right. They actually analyze the text so it can stand. It can be reprinted.
I'd just like to concentrate for a minute, though, on some of the phrases in these 3 paragraphs, right? Which is, in the first paragraph, for instance, when they're talking about the Finished Mystery, they use the phrase abundance of spiritual illumination. Have you read Finished Mystery? And then about the books that replaced it, that is Rutherford's books, Light, very illuminating study of Revelation. Have you read Light? Another, the book I studied the book I studied was apparently a very illuminating study, but it was replaced in 1988 by another book.
Further update.
And they call that another in-depth study of that part of the Bible. If you've read the Revelation Climax book, you realize it's not an in-depth study. It's another self-referential book. It's about your history. And then about
The thrill
other
of it.
books beyond the Revelation studies, the 6 of them, it's much valuable spiritual food was provided. You're self-deceived.
Yeah.
And then they admit that their study method has been progressive, meaning that's our excuse for replacing our own books. Jehovah's Witnesses have spiritual food in abundance, and they keep telling you that, and you really do believe it because you've never seen a commentary on Revelation from anybody else but them.
Go into a Christian bookstore. Well, actually, there's not too many of them now. It's all online, but you can find so much good Christian food.
And it's not all uniform.
Yeah.
People are allowed to disagree, and they on Revelation they certainly do. But this again, this last paragraph, gall is the right word. Their experience is in harmony with the prayer of the Apostle Paul and the early disciples. Well, where do you have evidence that the early disciples, including Paul, ever preached times and seasons, or that they ever referenced Babylon the Great? Let's not forget that very expression, Babylon the Great, is in the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible. It's not basic doctrine, but for you as a Jehovah's Witness, it is basic doctrine. Because it's the flip side of Revelation being all about you. It's about Revelation saying, get out of her, and then you need to know who her is. So for you, Babylon the Great, as well as the book of Revelation, is basic doctrine. It wasn't so for the early church.
I remember when we left the Witnesses, I was so turned off by times and seasons at that point that they completely killed my interest in the book of Revelation. I read it, but I didn't understand it, and I didn't
really care.
Yeah, I didn't really want to study it anymore. But I had discovered the gospel. I had discovered that what the apostles talked about was always Christ and his resurrection. That's what they focus on every time they're preaching.
Paul puts it in 1 Corinthians 1 and 2. He preached Christ and him crucified, which of course includes the resurrection.
Now that's essential. We need to know that. That's how you get life. Through Christ.
The gospel. And you're admitting even on this page that your concentration has not been on the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's always about how things
End
foretold
times.
you.
And you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would be our link? I think you're going to link to a video about well, it's a series, really, isn't it? It's 8 videos. The very first 8 videos on Revelation that are on our playlist.
So it was when we first started the channel, and we were trying to concentrate on a lot of what we thought were essential things that we needed to know when we're leaving the Watchtower to get over the hurdles. So one of them was that. So how finished is the mystery, Watchtower-wise? To be continued to time indefinite was what we put in the title.
That's the first of 8 that compare the meat from Christendom with the poison you're getting from the Watchtower, just on the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And you do, I think it's in the 5th video, talk about the book that changed your mind.
Yeah, where I finally, and this is decades after. For decades I was not interested in the book of Revelation. I'd read it, but I was not going to study it or pursue that line of thinking. And then a book changed my mind, but it was decades later. Yeah, that's in the 5th of the series.
Yeah.
And we'll also put the Revelation playlist on. I don't know if you said that. But.
Yeah, those 8 videos were at the beginning, but now there's 110 videos on the Revelation playlist. So enjoy. See you next time.
Bye.